From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Hello, welcome. My name is John Kelly. I'm a columnist in the Metro section of the Washington Post. And the Washington Post, as you know, is a charter sponsor of the National Book Festival. So glad you could join us here today. Imagine a world where a ruthless, iron-fisted dictator rules through fear and intimidation, a martial state where the weak are tortured and pitted against each other as tests of loyalty, a world where scholars are subdued, used, and discarded. But enough about the Washington Post newsroom. Now, I'm just kidding. The Post is a wonderful place to work. I've been there 26 years, and it's been the home of many other interesting people, including the young woman we're about to meet. Sabaa Tahir worked for 5 years on the foreign desk of the Washington Post. Sadly, our paths never crossed. The Post is a big place, but she put her time there to good use. Sabaa has said that some of the stories she read and edited, true accounts of child soldiers, child slavery, war zones, crimes against humanity, genocides, and the disappeared, about the oppressed and the oppressors, sowed the seeds for An Ember in the Ashes, her best-selling novel from Penguin Random House. Sabaa grew up in the Mojave Desert, where her family ran an 18-room motel. The Huffington Post I saw described it as a run-down 18-room motel, which strikes me as rather rude of them. She attended UCLA, thought briefly of becoming a doctor, but became a writer instead. I think what Sabaa would secretly like to be is a rock star. In a way, she already is one. The foreign rights for An Ember in the Ashes have been sold in 24 countries. The book has been picked up by Paramount, and fans will be pleased to hear a sequel is on the way. Please join me in welcoming Sabaa Tahir to the 2015 National Book Festival.
I'm going to be a millennial here and take a picture of you all because there's so many people and I'm so excited. So everyone make a really ugly face. Thank you so much. So I have a cold, so I sound not too great, but I'll try not to cough or sneeze. John sort of stole most of my lines, but I will try to give you new information. It's true, my name is Sabaa Tahir, and I am the author of An Ember in the Ashes. That's my lovely cover. Ember is about a girl who is fighting for her family and a soldier who is fighting for his freedom. It is told from 2 points of view. The first is a girl named Laia, and the second is a soldier named Elias. So, when Laia's brother is thrown into prison by Empire soldiers and accused of treason, Laia knows that unless she does something, her brother is basically dead. So she makes a deal with a very dangerous rebel group. If they break her brother out of prison, she will risk her life to spy for them from a military academy. The other point of view is Elias. He is a soldier of the Empire, and Elias is Blackcliff's finest soldier. But he's also its most unwilling. All he really wants to do is break free of the Empire, but before he can do that, he's ordered to participate in an ancient rite that could tie him to the Empire forever or leave him dead. So when Laia and Elias's paths cross at Blackcliff, they realize that their destinies are intertwined and that their decisions could change the future of the Empire itself. I'm going to play you Ember's book trailers, and that'll hopefully give you a clearer sense of the story and the Empire. So here's the first one.
How far would you go for family? How far would you go for freedom? How far would you go for power? How far would you go for love? An Ember in the Ashes, a new novel by Sabaa Tahir. Available April 28th in bookstores everywhere.
I love her voice. So, smooth. this is the second trailer, and I really like this one because it's really creepy. So I hope you enjoy.
Elias? Elias?
An Ember in the Ashes, a new novel by Sabaa Tahir.
So the chanting that you hear is the phrase "duty unto death," which is the motto of Blackcliff Academy. So it's a very nice place. Those were the book trailers. I hope that one day there will be a film trailer. As John said, the book has been optioned by Paramount. It's in very good hands with Mark Johnson, who did The Chronicles of Narnia and Breaking Bad, and my brother, who will, make sure that the movie stays true to the book, or I'll set my mom on him. So, be afraid, brother. So my journey to becoming a writer actually did begin at a rundown 18-room motel. This is the motel. You'll notice it says Yucca Inn Motel. I spent much of my youth picking up the phone and saying, "Yucca Inn Motel, can I help you?" It was in a very small town in the middle of nowhere, and the town was kind of racist. And I think that when you're a kid and you hear people calling you and your parents terrible names and telling you to go back to where you came from, the world is really a scary place and a very lonely place. I never really spoke out, and I never defended myself. So as a kid, I felt so voiceless and so powerless. I can still remember the things that people would say and the things that they would do, and it stayed with me for many, many years. And by the way, when I say the middle of nowhere, I really mean the middle of nowhere. So that's my hometown, and that's the Mojave Desert, and the closest mall was 90 miles away, and I didn't actually understand what a mall was until I was 13, so that should give you a sense of where it was. Reading and writing and telling stories, that was my happy place. That's where I felt safest. But I didn't really think of writing as a legit career. I'm South Asian, and like many South Asian parents, mine were like, you're gonna become a doctor or an engineer, and that's what you're gonna do. And I have a million cousins, and they're all doctors and engineers. So I had a lot of pressure to take that route. But the problem was I hate math, and I did try working at a hospital, but I was like, I can't do this. So I decided that neither of those careers were going to work for me, and I went into journalism instead, and I worked at the Washington Post. And my parents at first were like, what are you doing? Why are you going into journalism? This is a ridiculous career. And then as soon as I started working at the Post, they were like, well, our daughter works at the Washington Post. So they did sort of come around to that idea, which was great. So the Post is really where this Ember starts. In 2007, I decided I wanted to write a novel. So I went back to my childhood, back to that feeling of being voiceless and being powerless, and I decided I wanted to write about people who, like me as a kid, felt like they had no place in this world, but unlike me, they would fight back and they would try to find their place. At the time, I was working at the Post Foreign Desk, and I read this story. And it was about women whose brothers and sons and fathers are taken by the local military and thrown into prison, often on trumped-up charges. And it really struck me because I have two older brothers, and they're my best friends, and this idea that there is a place in this world where they could just be taken from me, and I could never get them back, and there's no recourse for it, really freaked me out. So that's how Ember was born. It took me 6 years to write, which is a very long time in the world of writing. The story revealed itself very slowly to me because I wasn't just writing a book, I was building this whole world. It was really, really important to me that this world be authentic and true. So that meant research. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about that research, and I promise it won't be boring because there's lots of pretty pictures of cool looking dudes with badges. The first type of research I did were interviews. My book has soldiers in it and has warriors in it, but I am not a soldier or a warrior. So to help me figure out what it meant to have the soul of a warrior, I decided that I would interview modern day warriors in the hopes of learning something useful. So I interviewed an FBI agent, and she told me about these terrible, terrible personal sacrifices that she had to make to do her job. And I will never forget, in talking to her, I said, "What's the worst thing you've ever gone through?" And I expected, she works on a violent gangs task force in San Jose, which is pretty intense. And I expected her to say, I don't know, like someone pulled a knife on me or a gun, or like someone attacked one of my other fellow agents. But instead she said, "My custody battle was the worst thing that I've ever been through." And it really helped me understand that the personal means just as much to these people in uniform and these people who are seen as warriors as it does to you or to me. I interviewed a police officer, and within about 10 seconds of meeting him, he told me the three things on my table that he could use to kill me. So one was my headphones, which he would like, and then one was a pen, and the last was a coffee cup, which I thought was very creative. So that was educational, and that sort of helped me tell Elias's story a little bit better as a soldier who's always prepared and who always has a plan B and a plan C and a plan D. And then the last person I talked to who really made an impact was a West Point cadet, and he was one of the most impressive 20-year-olds I've ever met. I walked into a coffee shop, and it was really crowded, and I spotted him immediately because he was the only person with amazing posture. And as soon as I walked up to him, I sort of looked at him, and he was like, "Connor," and sticks out his hand and like breaks my hand. I'm like, ah. And he told me all about why he decided to go to West Point and what it was like there, and like the weird rituals that they have, and that was awesome. So that really helped me. That really helped me inform my characters. And those interviews were a direct result of working at the Post and of seeing reporters interview, because firsthand sources are basically the best way to write a story. So I also researched Rome. Characters are part of world building, but what about the actual world, right? So I needed consistent rules, I needed architecture, I needed clothing, and I've always liked ancient Rome because it was like such a crazy, backstabby, place where everyone was always trying to screw everyone else over, and there was all this politics, and I just think it's a great background. So I did all this research on ancient Rome and the architecture and the people and the social mores, and I did a ton of research on clothing and on tattoos, actually, because I had to have a bunch of tattoos in the book. So I have all these geometric tattoos, and yes, it was occasionally to procrastinate because it was much more fun to look at pictures of cute boys with really nice tattoos than it was to actually write my book. But I swear, part of it was research, I promise. And then my favorite thing to research was weaponry. When it came to Blackcliff, I dug into Sparta. So I think when people think Sparta, they think the Battle of Thermopylae, or they think of that movie with like the really ripped dudes who are always like yelling and waving around their swords. But Sparta was more than that. Boys entered the ancient Spartan agoge when they were 7 years old, and they were trained in this like horrible way. They were cast into the wild to defend for themselves. They were starved, they were beaten, they were set against each other. And this happened in our world. It was a long time ago, true, but it's real. It's part of our history. So I used that when I created the military academy, Blackcliff. So after a ton of writing and rewriting, I finished the book in 2013, and I got it to an agent, which is something that you need if you want to get published. And then my agent shot my book to publishers, and I got the film deal, and I got the book deal with Penguin. The book will be translated into 28 languages, all these countries, and then a few more. That meant a lot to me personally because my family is from Pakistan, and the idea that people all over the world can read this in their own language is just so cool. So that's how I became a writer. It was a lot of hard work and perseverance. It's a ton of screwing up and then learning and trying to get better. Are any of you guys writers? Yes? Awesome. Okay. So I always give the same advice to writers, which I'll give to you now, which is one, read a lot, read all the time. You can read in the line at the bank, you can read anywhere, anytime, because we can take our phones with us now, and I think there's really no excuse for not constantly reading, and never give up. I spent 6 years on this book, and that's a really long time. I still remember there was a point a year before it was finished where I told my husband, I was like, I can't do this. This book is never going to get done. And he was like, no, keep going. Don't be a wuss, basically. And at first I was like, no, you don't understand, like pain. But he was right. It really does take a lot of perseverance, and it's something that is not easily done. So stick to it. You're really not alone if you're a writer and you're struggling. I'm writing my second book right now, and I was on the plane, and I was doing this scene, and it was like driving me up the wall. And I finally like slammed my computer shut, and the woman like 2 seats over was like, "Are you a writer?" I was like, "You're a writer too, huh?" She's like, "Yep." So frustration is just part of it. And you know, I wasn't born knowing how to write. It's something that I had to really, really work on. And I didn't start writing fiction until I was 25, 26. So you can start at any point, and if you work hard enough, I think that you'll get here. So, it's my face, that's not good. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. And comments, please. Yes?
I noticed that you use a lot of creatures from like Arabian Nights, like jinn, stuff like that. Did you do research on them as well? Or?
I didn't do as much research on the creatures because when I was a little girl, my mom used to tell me these stories that would like scare the pants off me when she was trying to get me to be good. So one of the stories she told me is that jinn live in trees, and that you should never bother a tree at night because a jinn could pop out and possess you. I think I was like 4 when she told me this. So ever since, when I walk at night, I like, if there's a tree, I'll like walk around it. I do this still to this day, and I've actually gotten my husband to do it too. Now he's like totally weirded out by trees at night. So hopefully I will pass this on to some of you. So she used to tell me these stories, and I did a little bit of research into like the types of jinn, but she would tell me about ghouls, and she was a storyteller and still is. So I think I got my first sort of mythical tales from her.
Okay, so no research,
Just mom.
go back on your traumatic childhood.
Yeah, no, basically. And I would call her and be like, so remember that story of the jinn? And she was like, oh God, I can't believe you remember that, you know, so. Yes.
Hi, do you think you could make a sequel for Ember?
There is a sequel. There is going to be a sequel for Ember. I can't reveal the title yet. It's a something, and then there's, hold on. I think the word "the" is also in it. So there's an A, and there's a "the," and that's all I can tell you. There is going to be a reveal at some point here in the next probably month or so. So, and it's going to follow Elias and Elia as they go north to try to save Darren. And we will also have Helene's point of view. She's tough to write, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, hi. Yes, sorry.
So, when you were writing the book, did you prefer writing from Elias' point of view or Elias's, or did you like both?
I liked both, but Elias was infinitely more difficult. You know, writing from the point of view of a 17-year-old girl who's like totally terrified was not very difficult for me. I was like, where are those journals that I used to keep? But a 20-year-old soldier who's very fearless but who struggles morally, that was something that was a little more tough. So I liked him because it was definitely a challenge. And to try to distinguish their voices, I wrote the whole story, and then I did one edit that was a tone edit, and it just went through and I listened to like A Fine Frenzy and all these sort of Laia-esque bands, and tried to hear her voice in my head and then did her tone. And then when I did Elias, I listened to, you know, 9 Inch Nails and Green Day, and watched like Apocalypse Now, like all these soldier movies, and was like, okay, like I've got his voice. So that was sort of how I tried to separate them.
All right. Also, Did you know from the beginning that you'd have the mythological element to the story? Because that, like, I didn't see that coming, and then it was suddenly a huge part of it.
I did. It was never meant to be a huge part of the first book. In the same way that that world starts to appear to the characters, I wanted it to start to appear to the readers, because I really wanted them to entrench them in the world and have them experience that wait what moment, you know, where it's like this thing is real. There's a moment where Elias faces off with something supernatural, and it's like he has to get past his prejudices about what exists and what doesn't. So, thank you. Yes.
Hi. For your first novel, it's kind of ambitious to do two different perspectives that are very different, but you did it so well. What made you decide to do that from the beginning, that you were going to have two people to tell from?
I've always really loved inside-outside narratives, but really, again, it goes back to journalism. The best stories were ones that had multiple points of view in terms of, you know, multiple people interviewed from different sides of things. I edited a lot of stories about Iraq and Afghanistan and the wars that were going on there. And there was this incredible reporter named Anthony Shadid, and he used to write these stories from points of view that you would never expect. And I think that that's why his stories were so moving. So in a weird way, you know, his work and the work of other reporters sort of inspired me to look beyond just one character and try to find, I mean, this world does not have two sides. It's not just the scholars and just the empire, but that's sort of all I could fit in this book, so that's what I chose to do. Thank you. Yes.
Did you always plan to write a sequel, and how many books do you plan to write in this world?
I had my characters' whole lives planned out, because that's the kind of nerd that I am. But I sold one book, so I knew that I had to just hope that readers were going to like it enough. And I think a lot of readers who came out and said we really want a sequel don't understand what a huge impact that had on my publisher. It was a big deal for them to tweet at Penguin Teen and say, please give us a sequel, or to write to them. It's huge. So if any of you guys did that, thank you. You guys are the reason there is a sequel. And I hope that I see, right now I'm really focusing on the second book, but I think probably 4 books, if I could have my way. So, thank you. Yes?
I just wanted to say that it means so much to read a book with diverse characters.
Yes.
So I just wanted to know, what does it feel like to be a role model? I think I talk to girls who are just like, they feel included by reading books with diverse characters, so I just wanted to get a sense of what it means to you.
Thank you, first of all, because that means a lot to me. I grew up and I didn't have books with diverse characters. The very first book I read with someone who I felt looked like me, we call them mirror books, was 7 Daughters and 7 Sons, and it was a book about a Persian girl. And I remember reading that book. I was in 4th grade, and it was the only book in the entire elementary school library that I connected to in that way. I actually checked it out almost constantly for 2 years, and then I asked the librarian if I could buy it from her, and she was like, you could lose it, and like, I wouldn't tell anybody, but I was a goody-goody, and so I didn't. I was like, I want other people to read this too. I was very responsible as a 6th grader, apparently. So for 2 years, actually, I think 3, yeah, I was like middle of 4th grade, 4th, 5th, and 6th, I read this book. And so when I was writing, it did not once occur to me to think about what these characters really look like. I just wrote what I saw in my world. And I live in the Bay Area, and I've lived in Northern Virginia, and there's a huge amount of diversity. So to me, you know, Laia is, you know, my skin tone. Elias is my skin tone. Dex is, you know, darker than that. Marcus, Zach, they're dark skin tone. Helene is pale. And I didn't want skin color to be the big divider in the book. I wanted ideology to be the big divider. But one of my favorite things is when people fan cast on Tumblr, and I see all these gorgeous actors and actresses that are diverse actors, and it's like the best thing.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Hi, Meg. Hello. Okay, I gotta say something. This lovely lady broke her toe and came anyway, and so I think we should all clap for her.
We just embarrassed her. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Okay, yes, hi.
Okay, so in the first book,
Elias is told that he would become everything he hated. So does that mean in the second book that he will do something to Leia that he never once thought he would do before?
You know, the augurs told Elias that if you run, you will become everything that you hate before you do your duty. So he did his duty to the Empire. So he's safer than he was. But I think that when you're raised in the type of world that he's raised in, there is always the chance that you'll slip. Because for him, killing is an instinct. It's not something that it's something he has to fight against. It's always his first response to a threat. But we'll see. You know, his and Leia's path is pretty rough. So, sorry, that was a non-answer. Yes. Hi.
So Elias and Leia are amazing, incredible characters, and their development and everything. I was wondering, what is your personality again? Like, what personality could you relate to them?
Oh, okay. So I actually relate most to the Commandant. No, I'm kidding. I don't. She's really evil, guys, so that's why I don't. That's why it was a joke. But anyway, I relate to Leia's fear, because that was me as a 17-year-old. I also relate to her determination. I'm sort of freakishly stubborn. It used to bug the crap out of my parents when I was a little kid, but it's come in very handy as an adult. So if you're stubborn and your parents are like, oh, you're so stubborn, be like, you know what? Maybe I'll write a book one day. So that's what I related to with Leia. And then with Elias, it was really the moral struggles that he had, because that's something that you know, I've had to deal with in life. It's like, okay, you know, do you fight back when people are horrible to you? Do you believe something just because everybody else does? Those are things that I've had to deal with. And him feeling like an outcast, I really related to that. And that was sort of how I connected to my characters.
And I was wondering, what was your exact favorite scene throughout the first book to, like, even write or begin writing?
There are two scenes. One is the Moon Festival scene, which I hope the Emberlings in the crowd will relate to. And then one was a scene between Elias and Marcus. It was at the very end of the book, and Marcus has just done something really terrible. And it was a very, very hard scene to write, because even when your characters are like these horrible people, I think to write them well, you have to love them. And so it was just really hard to write that scene.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi.
First, I just want to say that it's awesome that you are into journalism, because I'm studying journalism at the moment.
Yay!
And I really want to be an author. But
I just Washington Post.
I would love to. That would be awesome. But what was your process like getting connected with your agent and publishing?
It was a cold query. So when you want to publish a book, you have to query agents. They're sort of the gatekeepers to the publishing world. And the way that you usually query them is you send a letter. And the letter is a query letter. And it's kind of like a cover letter for a job. You basically talk about your book, and you talk about yourself a very little bit, and you hope that it grabs the interest. So I cold queried a bunch of agents, got a really great response, and actually then had to go and try to figure out who I was going to pick. And I went and I met my agent, which I really, really, really recommend, because I had sort of decided who I was going to pick, and then I met my agent, and it was like true love. So she's amazing. And she has really believed in the book and all it could be from day one. So yes, good luck.
Thank you.
Hi.
I was wondering how it was writing one of the trials, the one between Elias and Helene, when the intense battle where basically a lot of people die. I was crying the entire time, because it was one of the, like, during fight scenes in a lot of books, I get like lost because they just seem very like crowded, but you did it really well, and I
thank you
followed it in like every way, and it was just amazing.
Thank you so much. That scene was also really difficult to write. There is a phrase in writing called pulling your punches, which is where you don't write what you're afraid to write because you're afraid. And I was initially doing that with that scene, and then it didn't read right, and I was really frustrated because I knew it was a very pivotal scene for my character's development. So then I asked myself, what would actually happen? And when I asked myself that question, I realized that a lot of people would die, and that it would stay with the characters throughout their lives. So you will see the results of that in the second book, because book 1 ends like 3 days after that. So we have not recovered from that quite yet. Good question. Thank you. Hi.
Hi, I was just wondering if you had any tips for writers or anyone who wants to be a writer.
Yeah, absolutely. So read a lot, definitely, like I said. Get a critique group. I think that that's really helpful. Even one person to read your work. Try not to make it a relative. I have a brother who reads everything, and it's because he's kind of a jerk when it comes to reading, and he will say the things I don't want to hear, like, this scene is really bad. So that's why I use him, but try to find someone who's going to be honest with you. That's really important. And write every day if you can. One of my biggest regrets is that in college I didn't write every day, and I didn't focus on honing the craft. I just didn't think that I was going to be a fiction writer, so I was like, why would I do that? Such a waste of time. So, write as much as you can, and make it a priority.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi. So if your book would ever become a movie, what actors would you want to play the characters?
I would love to answer that question, but actually, it was like a really annoying Hollywood answer about Paramount. It's like, don't answer that question. So I can't answer that question. I'm so sorry. I think that for the Commandant, anyone from Charlize Theron to Tilda Swinton to Rosamund Pike to, there's another one I can't remember, but she's really freaky. What's her name? Cersei Lannister. What's her name? Does anyone remember?
Oh.
Yes. Yeah. I think any of them would be amazing as the Commandant, but okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting a sign that I have to wrap up. I'm over my allotted time. Thank you guys so much for coming and for asking such lovely questions.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.